In the Gulf of Persia, tucked between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, lies one of the most strategically vital and least understood corridors in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. At just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, this waterway carries nearly one-fifth of the world's daily oil supply, a staggering volume that underpins the global economy. What happens here doesn't stay local. It ripples through markets, industries, and nations worldwide. In early 2026, as tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States escalated into an unprecedented geopolitical standoff, the Strait of Hormuz became a living chessboard. The Iranians, aware of the strategic leverage this narrow corridor gives them, have a long-term plan: trap America, control the flow of oil, and prolong the conflict to destabilize the global economy. If their strategy succeeds, the consequences could threaten the foundation of the American economic empire and send shockwaves across financial markets around the world. For decades, the strait has been a conduit for energy and trade, but its significance has rarely been fully understood by the public. Every day, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through Hormuz, along with vast volumes of liquefied natural gas. These resources are not just commodities, they are the lifeblood of industrial nations, feeding supply chains, transportation, power generation, and even military operations. When Iran hinted at controlling or partially blocking the passage, markets reacted immediately, with Brent crude spiking past $100 per barrel and global investors scrambling to hedge against a potential energy disaster. The reality became clear: whoever controls the strait controls not just energy, but global economic stability. Iran's long-term strategy is both subtle and ruthless. By holding up oil shipments and creating uncertainty, they force the United States and its allies to commit resources, naval forces, diplomacy, and economic leverage to keeping the passage open. Every delayed tanker, every insurance withdrawal, and every escalation of military tension strengthens their position. In essence, Iran is using the strait as a strategic trap: draw the US deeper into regional conflicts while controlling the global oil supply, thereby maximizing leverage over world markets. Analysts warn that even a short-term disruption could cause cascading effects: inflation spikes, currency volatility, and even social unrest in countries dependent on Gulf oil. But if Iran succeeds in prolonging the standoff, the consequences could be catastrophic on a macroeconomic level, with the American economy exposed to extreme risk over the long term. The stakes are monumental. Energy markets respond immediately to any disruption in the strait, and investors are watching every move. As commercial vessels steer clear of the conflict zone, the flow of oil slows, creating immediate shortages. Nations that depend heavily on Gulf oil, including the United States, China, Japan, and India, must scramble to find alternative supply routes. But pipelines and alternative shipping lanes cannot fully replace the volume that Hormuz provides. Even strategic petroleum reserves can only provide temporary relief. The Iranians understand this leverage and are intentionally prolonging uncertainty to maximize economic pressure. With oil prices climbing, inflation surging, and stock markets volatile, the potential for a systemic shock increases exponentially. For America, this is more than just an energy challenge. It's a test of strategic foresight and global economic stewardship. The United States must maneuver carefully to protect not just its own economy, but the global financial system that depends on stable energy flows. Naval deployments, satellite surveillance, and intelligence operations are critical to ensuring the strait remains navigable. Yet the strategy cannot rely solely on force. Diplomacy, alliances, and economic countermeasures must work in tandem to outsmart Iran's long-term plan. The goal is to maintain open oil lanes, stabilize markets, and prevent Iran from using the strait as a weapon to engineer a slow economic collapse. The psychological dimension of this standoff is equally critical. Iran is aware that uncertainty drives fear, which in turn drives markets to react more violently than they would to physical disruption alone. By sending mixed signals, closing off certain channels temporarily, and conducting naval exercises near commercial routes, They cultivate an atmosphere of tension that magnifies the impact of even minor actions. Traders, companies, and even governments begin to anticipate crises, pricing in worst-case scenarios and thereby accelerating financial consequences. The tactic is clear: make the world believe that the strait might remain closed indefinitely, even if the physical closure never lasts more than a few days. This psychological leverage is part of a sophisticated long-term plan to pressure global economies while minimizing direct confrontation. The US response has been multi-layered. Military assets are positioned to ensure that commercial shipping can continue safely, but the strategy also involves economic countermeasures, including sanctions and coordination with allies to maintain alternative supply routes. Intelligence agencies track Iranian naval movements, anticipate potential blockades, and plan interventions to avoid escalation into open conflict. Simultaneously, financial regulators and commodity exchanges monitor market reactions closely, ready to implement emergency measures to stabilize prices and prevent panic-driven sell-offs. The stakes are clear. Failure to maintain the flow of oil through the strait could trigger cascading consequences for the American economy and global financial markets alike. This crisis is not just about immediate oil shortages. It is about the strategic interplay of power, finance, and diplomacy. Each decision, whether to escort a tanker, apply additional sanctions, or negotiate behind the scenes, has implications that ripple across continents. Every day the strait remains under tension, the longer-term risk of structural damage to the American economic empire grows. Inflation could accelerate, trade balances could destabilize, and confidence in financial institutions could waver. Iran's plan, in essence, is to make the strait a lever, using uncertainty and delay as tools to manipulate global markets to its advantage. The stakes become even more dramatic when considering the human and geopolitical consequences. High oil prices affect the cost of living, from gasoline and heating to groceries and shipping. Inflationary pressures can lead to social unrest, political instability, and electoral consequences in democracies heavily reliant on imported energy. Beyond economics, the military and diplomatic consequences create a high-stakes chessboard, where missteps could escalate into broader regional or even global conflict. In this context, Hormuz is no longer just a waterway. It is a symbolic and literal bottleneck where global power is negotiated. To counter this threat, strategic foresight is essential. The United States and its allies must anticipate Iranian moves, deploy resources efficiently, and maintain global market confidence. Proactive measures, such as ensuring alternative shipping lanes, strengthening energy independence, and preemptively signaling military readiness, are critical to outmaneuvering Iran's long-term plan. The goal is to maintain the flow of oil, stabilize the economy, and prevent Iran from leveraging uncertainty into lasting economic damage. As the standoff unfolds, financial markets remain on edge. Traders monitor satellite imagery of tanker movements, track geopolitical news, and calculate potential supply chain disruptions. Every announcement, naval exercise, or diplomatic statement can trigger sudden volatility. Oil futures react within minutes, and the cascading impact touches stocks, bonds, currencies, and even consumer sentiment. Analysts warn that if uncertainty continues, it could set off a global economic domino effect, potentially undermining decades of stability and weakening America's strategic influence worldwide. Ultimately, the Strait of Hormuz crisis serves as a cautionary tale about the intersection of geopolitics, energy, and global finance. It illustrates how a narrow waterway can become a weapon in strategic conflict, how uncertainty can amplify market shocks, and how careful planning, intelligence, and diplomacy are necessary to preserve global stability. The Iranian strategy, to trap America, prolong conflict, and manipulate energy flows, highlights the sophistication of modern geopolitical warfare and its direct impact on economies, markets, and everyday life. For the United States and the global community, the challenge is to outsmart this strategy, protect vital trade, and ensure that the American economic empire and world economy remain resilient in the face of unprecedented pressure. The Strait of Hormuz remains a stark reminder that the global economy is fragile, that geopolitical tensions can escalate quickly, and that the balance of power is never static. The stakes could not be higher. The flow of oil, the stability of markets, and the future of nations all depend on decisions made at this narrow corridor of water. If Iran's plan to hold oil hostage and extend conflict succeeds, the consequences could reshape global finance for decades. If strategic foresight, diplomacy, and careful maneuvering succeed, the strait can remain open, markets stabilized, and the global economy preserved. The world watches, breath held, as this high-stakes drama unfolds, a real-time test of strategy, endurance, and the delicate balance of power in one of the most critical passages on Earth.